So today we're going to be talking about from insight to impact, some real strategies that you can use Cloverleaf for at every level. So even if we're going to be talking about if you're an individual contributor, if you're a team leader, if you're a talent leader or coach, whether you're internal or external, we're going to be covering all of our bases because we know that people come on these webinars from all different perspectives and from all different sort of levels of usage of Cloverleaf. Some of you might be newer to the platform. Some of you might be pros at the platform. So we want to just try to give a pretty varied approach. So I'll share with you our agenda. Little tip, I would suggest having your Cloverleaf dashboard open for this webinar. This is kind of going to be a little tactile playing around type of webinar. So if you want to do that, that's a little tip. We'll talk a little bit about what makes Cloverleaf different. Sometimes we get distracted by all the assessments instead of really appreciating all the functionality and the scenarios in which we can use Cloverleaf for. And so we're going to talk about that from a role based perspective. And we get these ideas, by the way, from you. Jason and I literally sit with the feedback that you provide us at the end of the webinar. So that's why it's so important to fill out the feedback form. We sit with it and we take your ideas. And sometimes there's so many good ideas. We look at how can we mix them together to provide these learning experiences. So your feedback is so important. So we'll talk about a little bit about what makes Cloverleaf different. Then we're going to give you we're going to share with you some examples of role-based scenarios. For example, a situation you might be in as an individual contributor, as a manager, or a talent leader, as a coach. We're going to share examples. Then we're going to give you some other scenarios and ask you, well, what would you do? Maybe you've been in these scenarios before and you've used Cloverleaf before, or maybe you've seen us use a feature before and you say, hey, well, you could use this feature for that. So in that case, we might ask some of you to speak and share maybe how some experiences that you've used Cloverleaf. And this is where we can kind of exchange some best practices. And then I'll ask some folks to share some wins and maybe some ways that you've used Cloverleaf. Then we'll get some feedback from you. You can ask questions. You can also pop questions in the chat. Jason will follow those along and you can ask those questions. If you have questions about your account or things like that, I would just save those for like after the webinar. You can ask Jason those in the support bubble and things like that. This is a learning environment. So if you have like, hey, my account doesn't work in this way, I would just save those for after the webinar and Jason can help you offline with those questions and get some issue with your account. This way we can just focus on the learning experience and then Jason can absolutely help you like one-on-one. He's trying to support the whole webinar here. He can support you one-on-one after the webinar. And then we'll share with you some upcoming ways to learn. We'll share with you our webinar for next month and you can save the date and all of that good stuff. Okay, so polls, just a quick poll. We want to just know who's here with us. It also helps us just sort of customize our approach. So Jason, if you would just share that quick poll, just let us know what role best describes you. Are you a senior or C-suite talent or learning leader? Are you a director or manager level talent or learning leader? Are you a manager of a team? Are you an individual contributor? Or are you a coach or consultant? So just let us know what role best describes you. Take a moment, just do that one little click for us. And let us know who's here with us today. Right, I know we can do 85%. I know we can get it. We're at 79%. We can get to 85%. Right. All right. All right, 81%. We'll take it. We'll take it. So we have our individual contributors are our biggest population with our director or manager level talent learning leaders coming in. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Awesome. Okay. All right. So what makes Cloverleaf different? Well, we try to provide daily coaching in the flow of your workday. And so these insights get delivered through your calendar, through your email, or through Slack or Teams. And these nudges are designed to build better habits over time. Sometimes you might get that little nudge that reminds you to use a strength, or maybe you get a nudge about somebody on your team and it reminds you, hey, I can maybe use that person as a sounding board, or I can leverage that person's strength, maybe especially if I don't see that person every day, or maybe I'm on a hybrid team or a remote team. It's also relationship-based coaching. It's not just about myself, it's also tips about other people and how I can engage with them, how I can communicate with them, how they might best receive feedback, how I can collaborate with them better. And tools like the thinking style comparison and even communication preferences can really help me to understand how I can communicate with people better. So for those of you maybe who are newer to the platform, this thinking style comparison can help me understand. I can select different assessments and understand a little bit more about how I communicate differently than someone, what my work style is based upon someone else, how I might interact in conflict differently, and how I can actually resolve conflict with someone better, right? So I can understand a little bit more about how I can collaborate better with someone. And there's also real-time searchable insights. So I can actually, if I'm preparing for a conversation and I might need communication style tips for Nor, right? I might need a little bit more to understand how they communicate. Maybe I'm new to working with Nora and I've just been assigned to work on a project with her. And maybe I'm an individual contributor and we're working cross-functionally. And I need to understand, how does Nora communicate? She's, great at helping people formulate their thoughts. Now, here's the thing. Nor does not appreciate long emails with detailed information. Perhaps reconsider that if I'm going to communicate with Nor. Maybe if I'm a big long email writer, that might not go over well with Nor. This is a really good thing for me to know, right? So this is great preparation, especially if maybe I'm starting to work with someone, maybe who still works in my organization, but that I don't work with regularly. Maybe I'm coming onto a new project. I can just quickly type in a few questions in here and understand a little bit more about this person. So these are real-time searchable insights that I can consider into my approach, right? If I'm not sure, I may even say, hey, Nor, I read this thing about you. It said this, like, is this, accurate? Is this something? Yeah, actually, that's spot on about me. Don't send me a long email. I'm probably not going to read it, right? I can confirm it. I can have conversations. It can be a conversation opener for me. And so that's what makes it a little bit different. Now, if I were to just take a DISC assessment, I would not get that from a DISC report, mostly because if you take a DISC assessment and you go to a DISC workshop, you are not distributed everybody else's DISC DISC report. And you are not given specific actionable insights from that DISC report. You are given descriptions and analysis, right? So it's really important that we understand a little bit more about ourselves in this digestible way. And that's really what makes it different. And, we're a transactional workforce, right? We start our day, we open up our calendar, we open up our email. We don't think to ourselves, well, what's my communication strength? Or what's Jason's preferred communication style? We don't think of those things, but Cloverleaf helps us to start our day with those thoughts, to help us to start our day by getting that email and being intentional, because we would not normally start our day with, ooh, let me wonder what my strengths are and let me wonder what the strengths are of my team. We're just not naturally going to do that, right? So Cloverleaf gives us that opportunity. So let's think a little bit about maybe how you've been interacting with your coaching tips. So what's a coaching tip you've received? And you don't have to share the exact tip. You could just say, hey, I got this tip about, maybe how I communicate or how I could collaborate or how I could leverage the strength. And a coaching tip you've received recently that stuck with you and why, and share with us in the chat. So just about, you don't have to, again, you don't have to recite the tip. Maybe you just recall getting it recently and it stuck with you, it resonated with you, and tell us, about it and why it really stuck with you. What was it about? Did you take any action about it? Did it reinforce something? Were you reminded of something important? What was its impact on you? Melissa shared its application of skills that I know I have and how they are valuable to others. So validation. So Melissa got some validation. Someone else shared, I have a new manager that previously was with my peer. I've learned how to communicate more effectively with him to support him in his new role. Okay, so I got a tip about somebody else that helped me communicate. This person helped them communicate better with that person. Someone shared they got a tip about how to best approach a teammate when handling conflict. Okay, good. It was a reminder. It's a reminder. How can I approach this person, right, when I might have to handle conflict? Okay, good. We love those little tips. Jennifer shared how to better prepare for meetings with individuals. Excellent. Somebody might appreciate a different approach. Small tweaks, big changes, right? Small tweaks that we can make to an approach to a meeting can make a big change. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Good, great. Confidence building tips. Excellent. So some people are sharing with us directly, just to us. Some people are sharing with everyone. Totally fine. If you're sharing just to host and panelists, I'm sharing your chat anonymously, but you can totally do that with us. That's completely fine. You can also share in the chat with everyone if you'd like. That's your choice. So Lisa shared, if working on a project, it's good to know the boundaries for both people. Yes, so some people have a different approach to maybe project management, project working together, project communication. Excellent. Great. Anyone else have a tip recently that maybe resonated with them or that they took an action with or that helped them? Okay, someone should, you may find it difficult to endorse an action plan your team puts forth if you feel the plan is rushed. In these situations, you may want more time to look things over rather than accept the plan as is. This may be an excellent opportunity to experiment with trust and have faith in your collaborators. Okay, good. So this is a tip. So this person's sharing a tip that they got, right? That helps them. Okay, good. Excellent. Someone shared it validated perceived differences between coaches and how to best utilize their skills, how to ask questions, and it gave reassurance on how to proceed. So this tip, again, validated something for you. Someone else shared with us, I'm interviewing for a new position within my organization, and this tip helped me prepare for my interview with people that I haven't worked with directly in the past. Okay, excellent. So this is a great example. If you are trying to navigate within your organization for career development purposes, this is an awesome example of how you can use tips for interview purposes. Excellent. For networking and career development. Excellent. Awesome. So thank you for those of you that have shared some of that with us. Great. Okay. So we're going to do some role-based scenarios. So I'm going to share some examples with you, and then I'm going to ask you to also feedback and share your best guess and your ideas with us. So this is a role-based scenario for an individual contributor. So let's just say you're working with someone whose communication or thinking style is very different from yours. Maybe this is a person who might be new to your team, or maybe it's someone that you were put on a project team with that isn't part of your team or isn't part of your department. So you might want to try this. You might want to try using the thinking styles comparison before your next shared meeting. Now, the thinking styles comparison can shift depending on your the chosen assessment. So for example, if you look at someone's DISC style, you're going to find out a little bit more about how you operate, right? And what your motivation is in terms of how you operate on your specific team, right? And it's going to tell you how these two people can achieve results together when you look at the DISC comparison. It's going to tell you what these two people want to, what their desired outcomes are, and how they're alike and how they're different. It's also going to tell you, if you look at your DISC side by side, the communication preferences. So Noor's communication preference is passive resistance, right? They might not necessarily be upfront about any of their grievances, and they might quickly compromise. Whereas Quinn is going to be a little bit more impatient and a little bit blunt. So you can see right away these two people have two different communication styles. Okay. And this shows how these two people can actually come together to work better. So Quinn has to slow down and focus more on listening and not dominate the conversation, but Noor has to actually speak up. So Noor might be looking at this and saying, okay, I actually have to assert myself more. And Quinn might say, okay, I actually have to maybe work on active listening. So this is going to show these two people how they have to shift a little bit towards their natural work style to be able to work with this other person. And this is in a peer individual contributor setting. Now, if in this situation there was more high conflict, more than just like work style friction, you might want to look at the Enneagram comparison. So the Enneagram comparison will actually tell you what the source of conflict is and the reaction to conflict is, and how the two people can actually resolve the conflict by remaining self-aware, by connecting with their true self, right? And so it will talk a little bit about how they can form a better, more helpful team, and what their differences are, again, in communication, in work style. And so this can also help to sort of depersonalize the conflict by understanding these two people, just by the fact that they have different natures, might cause friction. And this might help a person prepare, right? This might help these two people prepare for these conversations. Now, it could also be that you could apply a daily coaching tip to adjust your approach. Now, you could either look at your own daily coaching tip, right, to see if it's relevant, or you could also search a tip as well, right? So you could search a relevant tip here in the insight search. So these are just two different ways you could, in this scenario, as an individual contributor, use Cloverleaf in this particular role-based scenario. So this is an everyday thing where you're working with someone, your communication or your thinking style is different, right? Now, what if you're in, my slides are stuck. Okay, so now you're in another role-based scenario. Now you're a team leader or a manager, and you're preparing for a one-on-one, or you're getting ready to give feedback. So you might want to use insight search here to refresh how a direct report prefers to receive input. So for example, I might say, how can I give feedback to, to Quinn? Right. And so this is going to tell me a little bit about how I should prepare giving feedback to Quinn. Okay. And so it's going to tell me to maybe emphasize the positive. It's telling me a little bit about motivate Quinn to take performance feedback on board by being specific and being prepared with facts, evidence, and metrics to back up areas of concern. So it's going to let me know that if I'm going to give feedback to Quinn, it's probably anecdotal, like, narrative probably isn't going to go over well. If I'm going to ask for improvement, I'm going to need numbers, because that's probably going to resonate a little bit more with Quinn. Okay. And so it's telling me a little bit how I can prepare. Also, one of the other things I can do is I can reference a daily coaching tip to reframe or redirect. I can also pay attention to when I get tips about Quinn as well. So maybe as I'm preparing for that one-on-one, as I see a tip about Quinn in my daily coaching reflections, I can maybe save some of those and say, oh, I can. One of the other things you can do when you're ever in your daily coaching reflections. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get a tip about Quinn, but let's just say it was Kai that I had to give the feedback to. And okay, this is interesting. So let's say it was Kai I had to give the feedback to. To Kai, everything is personal. Learn to see that as passion and care in action and aim to finding a middle ground between objectivity and subjectivity. So maybe I want to remember this for my one-on-one. So how can you honor Kai's personal approach while guiding them towards a balanced perspective? Well, maybe I want to discuss this in our one-on-one around creating space within connecting personally to tasks. And maybe I'm going to hashtag that for my one-on-one, because this is a thought that I might want to bring in to prepare for my one-on-one. So I might save that, and I will go back to my reflections. And when I go to one-on-one, it's going to bring that up. Okay. So as maybe I'm preparing for that conversation, as maybe I'm having the conversation with Kai, I can tag those little insights in there and regard that. Okay. Okay, so so someone just asked a good question about it. Can you see a thinking style comparison for other employees outside my manager and direct report? So as long as a person has their visibility settings set to a certain level of visibility, you can go onto Dashboard Builder and you can build a dashboard with you and that person. So if you go onto Dashboard Builder and you want to compare yourself with somebody, so let's say Reese and Avery were not on the same team, but Avery had his visibility settings such that he could be searched and they could be compared. You could add a temporary dashboard with just Avery. And this is not, you're not making a team. Now, all of a sudden, Reese could compare themselves with Avery. Okay. But that person has to have their visibility settings such that they're available to be selected. Okay. So that's the way you can do that. Okay. Okay. So now my slides are still stuck. Okay. Role-based scenarios. If you're a talent leader or an HR leader or your coach, you're embedding Cloverleaf into a leadership development initiative or coaching program. So try this. So you might want to use daily coaching themes to reinforce development content. So you could do exactly what I just did in this webinar. If you are, let's say, asking people to consume their daily coaching tips, I always say that when I am leading any kind of leadership development initiative or I'm doing any kind of coaching program or coaching engagement, whether I'm doing one-on-one coaching or I'm doing like a leadership communication program, I will issue as a challenge for people to consume their daily coaching. I prefer reflections. I will say do your daily reflections 2 to 3 times a week. I will start either a one-on-one coaching session or a training session with please share a tip with me of that you consumed in the past, the past week or two, or since our last training session or coaching session that resonated with you or that you took action with. And I will start a session with that prompt. So you could do the same thing, just the prompt that I gave you, you could do that very same thing and ask people to come to a session to share. It also holds them accountable for that challenge that you've given them to start out their day. Now, especially if I'm doing leadership development, I do a 6-month, program where I teach leadership communication skills. And I ask those leaders to do their daily reflections at least 2 times a week. Now, it takes about 1.5 minutes to do your daily reflection. So it takes about 1.5 minutes for you to come here and for you to do your daily reflection. So what do I mean by that? For you to come in here and for you to actually click and do the reflection on yourself and someone else. It takes about 1.5 minutes. So I said, if you are in this leadership development program and you are telling me that you cannot invest 3 minutes in 1 week in your own leadership development, then we have to have another conversation. Because here's the thing, I am challenging leaders to invest time in themselves. And so you go to that computer and you look at all your emails and you look at your calendar. I need you to invest 3 minutes in 1 week in yourself and in the development of others. And I'm challenging you to take that on. So it creates a level of accountability when you start a coaching session and you start a training session with, okay, tell me one of the tips that you took action on, or the tips that maybe encouraged you to reach out to somebody else, and you start the session with that. So I strongly encourage that you challenge people and you hold them accountable for using the system. You could also then, if you're training managers, cue them to reference insights during their one-on-ones, right? So they can then do that in their own team meetings, right? You could then encourage them to build a habit of starting their own team meetings with a relevant Cloverleaf insight, right? I will always encourage the leaders that are often in my programs, they have their teams on Cloverleaf, right? So I will say, bring this to your team and challenge your teams to be doing this, to be bringing in Cloverleaf insights to the team meetings, right? I want them to be collaborating and communicating as well. The more you can create accountability for small actions and then encourage that to be a chain sort of effect, the more that you can create this sort of culture of accountability, this culture of collaboration. Okay, now it's going to come time for what would you do? Okay, I just gave you a lot of ideas. So now you're going to have an opportunity to share. So we have a lot of individual contributors on this call. So this is where we're going to test this out with allowing you to talk. So individual contributors, and even if you're not an individual contributor, you can answer this too. You're prepping for a project kickoff with a new team. You're unsure how aligned you are with a key stakeholder. What Cloverleaf tools could help? So if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and we'll actually unmute you and you could speak and share. So if you want to be super brave and super awesome and be a live guest star on our Cloverleaf podcast, you can raise your hand and then we will unmute you and you could share. So if you want to share your answer to this question, we would love to hear from you. So, and again, anybody can answer this, but in this scenario with an individual contributor, you're prepping for a project kickoff with a new team. You're unsure of how aligned you are with a key stakeholder. What Cloverleaf tools could help? You could answer this in any way. So if you'd like to, okay, so let's see, Jennifer. Okay, so Jennifer, we just,
Hello.
Okay. Yes, hello.
I would definitely look at what type of a pacer they are to make sure I coordinate the meeting at their peak time along with my.
Oh, excellent. On energy rhythm, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, excellent. So I'm just going to show people what that is, right? So you want to know like what time of, right?
Correct.
Time of the day, like they might, if they're doing brainstorming, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So let's explain that to people. So let's say you were having a brainstorming meeting with them. Brainstorming usually is done in recovery, right? So you would want to make sure you do that meeting in the afternoon. Now, if you had to do a big data analysis meeting, you'd want to do that during peak time. Peak is for intense focus work. Excellent. So you want to strategically coordinate that meeting during the time they do their best thinking. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Great. All right. Anyone else want to share? Rhonda shared dashboard builder. Great. Amy shared Enneagram. Now there is really great content in Enneagram right on the team dashboard. So I'm going to just show you here. So if I was brand new and I wanted to working with someone and they had a different work style, I'd want to know what triad they were in. I'd want to know their strengths of their triad, and I'd want to know their blind spots. And if I wasn't in the same triad as them, I'd want to know, if not, right, how I can collaborate with them. So there's a lot of great content right on the dashboard. Awesome. Okay, good. Instinctive drives, what matters most to each of us? Where do we relate, right? So are we driven by the same things? For example, are we both driven to improvise, or do we both avoid improvisation, right? Where are we the same? Where are we driven by the same things? Where do we avoid the same things? Where might we be diverse? Thank you, Melissa, for sharing that. Great. Awesome. Excellent answers. Awesome. All right, let's go to our next challenge. So scenario 2, team leaders. You want to follow up on feedback with a teammate, but you worry it may come across too strong or too vague. What feature could guide your approach? Maybe it's something really like challenging that you have to share with somebody. You don't want to be too strong, but you also like don't want to leave out details. You're a leader. What feature would okay, good. Insight search. If you do want to speak, you can raise your hand. We'll let you speak. Disc thinking style comparison. So I know how to speak where it lands with them. Okay, great. Some communication preferences. Thinking style comparison would work again here too. If anyone does want to speak, you can raise your hand. We'll let you speak. How do you get energy rhythm activity? So energy rhythm is just an assessment that would need to be on the dashboard. So you would just have to check with your organizational admin to see if they have it on your specific dashboard. Okay, 16 types, perception and judgment. Okay, so Shantae, I'm going to bring that up because that's really important. 16 types, cognitive thinking pair. Shantae is going super creative on us. So perception and judgment is your cognitive thinking pair. It's actually how you consume and how you make decisions on what you hear. So it's the 2 middle letters of your 16 types are how you mentally consume and organize information. So you would want to know if you were about to deliver some difficult, sensitive feedback, okay, you would want to know what is that first impression when they actually consume that information. Are they an ST? Do they want to know details right up front? Are they straight to the point kind of people? Because if they are, they don't want you to sugarcoat it. Or are they more an intuitive feeler? Are they more people oriented? Do you have to make a lot of connection first, right? Do you have to create a lot of, relationship first? Okay. So I would want to know a little bit about how they process, consume, and organize and decide upon what they're hearing. So you have to unveil this by clicking on this. You don't normally see this when you look at 16 types. You have to click right here. So this is an excellent call out, Shantae. Thank you. Very good call out. All right. Our next scenario, scenario 3. You're rolling out a development program and you want managers to stay engaged. Someone asked if I could show you where to click. You just click right here, cognitive function pair, and that will reveal it on 16 types. Okay. So for those of you that are chatting just to us, I just don't want to make it weird people to think that we're like talking to ghosts. So some people are chatting just to us. So if you're not seeing it, people are just telling. So I'm speaking to the people that are chatting just to the host and the panelists. Okay. So it's okay that you do that. I just don't want the other people to think that I'm like talking in the air. Okay. So scenario 3, talent leaders and coaches, HR leaders, you're rolling out a development program and you want managers to stay engaged between sessions. but they're busy and adoption is inconsistent. How can you use Cloverleaf to reinforce learning without adding more meetings? So what can you do? You know all the functionality of Cloverleaf, or you know enough of it. I've shown you a bunch of things, right? So what can you do? You're rolling out this development program. You want managers to stay engaged. You don't want them to forget that you've trained them. Okay, what are you going to do? You can, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and we can let you speak. You can be a guest on this Cloverleaf guest, or you can chat. What features are you going to have them use? What exercises, what micro learning are you going to integrate? Anyone? What would you do? We have some awesome talent leaders on this webinar. What would you do? What have you done already? You could do disk similarities, absolutely. It could help them, something, if especially if you are doing some more deeper disk work as part of that, you could do that on someone using the thinking styles comparison. I might assign, like I mentioned, them to do the reflections. I might assign them to specifically use insight search in preparation for one-on-ones. Like I might assign them to use some of the functionality matched with the content. So for example, in one of my training programs, I teach a specific module on conflict. So what I do then is I give them specific prompts that I have them use in Insight Search that match the content I am teaching, right? So you have to think about your content that you're delivering. And then you have to say to yourself, how can I utilize Cloverleaf so that I don't really have to develop anything, right? Okay, so if I'm now delivering a module on giving effective feedback, I'm now going to make the action that they do to use Cloverleaf to prepare for giving feedback at least once between now and the next session. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to create a handout. I don't have to create anything. I just give them Cloverleaf as the engine to take action. I've given them the skills of how to have the conversation, of how to have the effective feedback conversation. But I've now given them Cloverleaf as the resource to customize the feedback to their direct report. Does that make sense? So I can pair Cloverleaf nicely with my module on how to have effective feedback conversations. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, great. Okay. So now we want to hear from okay, so Heather shared a great tip. I've been teaching the individual 16 types, DISC, and Enneagram within the company teams to show them what is available on the dashboard. I asked them to use the coaching tips and reflections or forward on the email tips of the teammate tips. Excellently. Sharing the tips and forwarding them creates conversation, creates relatedness. Excellent. All right, share one you've used recently in a similar or different scenario. So share an idea you've used recently in a similar or different scenario, or something you want to try after today's webinar. Okay, so share an idea that you've used Cloverleaf recently in a similar or different scenario, or something you want to try after today's webinar. Okay, so share one you've used recently in a similar or different scenario, or share something you want to try after today's webinar. You can pop it in the chat. Maybe you got an idea from something we shared today. Or maybe you've done something that really worked and you want to share it with us. So share it so everybody can see it also this way. Style, flexing communication styles, considering your preference and style and someone else you desire to speak with. Okay. Using the thinking styles comparison more before meetings and reviews. I like that. I want to try to get my team more engaged with Cloverleaf daily tips. I definitely suggest issuing a challenge. We do have a 30-day challenge, outline. I think, Jason, if you can dig that up at the Help Center, but you can also do
I already
some,
added it a
oh,
couple minutes
because
ago.
you're awesome. You can also do a custom challenge where you can say, okay, what are we willing to do? Let's say we'll do Cloverleaf reflections 2 to 3 times a week for the next month, right? So I definitely, the more you can create accountability around Cloverleaf, the easier it is, right? Create that. And the more then they're expecting you to kick off a meeting with, hey, let's share a tip, let's share an action you took, the more you'll create that engagement. The thinking styles comparison, great, Clyde, excellent. I plan to spend some time exploring DISC, excellent. And remember, if you go on to your team dashboard, let me just see here. It's actually, if you go to my assessments, some people don't realize this, but if you go to my assessments or you go to the team dashboard, these little question marks here, if you, I'm going to open it in a new tab, it'll take you to help articles about the assessments. So you can go and click on them and it'll take you to the help articles. Okay. So you see these little question marks. So I just went on the question mark for 16 types. You can dig deeper and go right off into the Help Center. Right? Excellent. Awesome. Okay. So we would love to have your feedback while we're getting that. Remember,